What's your relationship with play? How do you see play in your everyday life? As a child, how did you see it? And what about now as an adult? And even more importantly, if you were being honest, do you actually even think that this is an important question to ask yourself? Here's what I'm getting at. Many of us don't stop and pay attention to the significant impact of this idea of play in our lives and how it's transformed the way that we see the world now. You see, play is defined as this: to engage in activity for enjoyment and recreation rather than a serious or practical purpose. Pay attention to those first two words of the definition: to engage. These words assume that engaging in play is a given. But what if some people can't engage because of the obstacles that have made play inaccessible? Someone who has thought a lot about the significance of play and this inherent problem with it is Cody Goldberg. When Cody and his wife received the news that their daughter, Harper, was diagnosed with a condition that would require her to use a wheelchair for the rest of her life, it would change everything. More specifically, it would make Cody a forever zealot for inclusion of children experiencing disabilities in playgrounds across America. Cody ended up leaving his creative career where he'd worked for years with iconic brands like Red Bull and Adidas and set out to create an inclusive playground in my old hometown of Portland, Oregon. He held a big grand opening and named the playground Harper's Playground after his daughter. And that's where I found out about Cody. I've admired Cody for a long time and asked him to sit down for a conversation about play, experiencing disability, and how we can all make an impact in our communities like Cody has. Cody is such a humble and brilliant guy, and I loved getting to talk with him in my cool hipster hotel room in Portland, Oregon. I am Branden Harvey, and this is Sounds Good, the weekly podcast where we have conversations with inspiring people who are rejecting cynicism and using their lives to make an impact. I am so excited about this conversation, so let's just jump straight into it, play a little. First of all, welcome back from vacation.
Thank you very much.
How did the road trip go?
Oh my gosh, a 3-week adventure in an RV was an adventure. Absolutely.
That's amazing. And right before you left on the trip, we were thinking about recording, and then, everything fell apart on the RV, it seems. The toilet stopped working, the fridge stopped working.
Actually, in fact, many of the floorboards were pulled up at the time we first spoke. Yeah. It's a 1982 RV.
That's amazing.
It's a pretty old RV. And it's called a Tioga. So, yeah, your listeners should know that my daughter, Lennon, is in the room for this, and she was making sure I got the name of our RV correct. It's a
Perfect.
Fleetwood Tioga.
There we go. That's so fun.
Yeah.
But you got it up and running?
Yeah, we got it up and running, and it ran like a charm. I don't like to talk about the toilet in the RV too much, but it worked. And the refrigerator worked. And most importantly, the engine started every day, and it took us from point A to point B.
That's what you need.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Good family time?
Oh, it was amazing. In fact, I think the highlight for us as a family was that we went to sleep, and we woke up in the same, essentially, room every day.
Wow.
And the connection of us together was really special.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
There's 4 of you?
Yeah. My wife, April, daughter number 1, Harper, and daughter number 2, Lennon.
Lennon's right here. Hey, Lennon.
Lennon's in the room. She's covering her eyes because she's getting shy.
I love it. Man, so much of your story revolves around play. I would imagine you got to enjoy a lot of play on this adventure. Tell me what play was like for you as a child.
Wow. It's funny you ask that about this journey, this playground journey that I've been on, because when we started designing playground number 1, I really started to reflect on what my memories of play were as a child. I grew up in a very playful community, luckily. My parents were bona fide San Francisco hippies, and they absolutely preferred a playful lifestyle. So I grew up in a playful place, and probably in this interview, we're going to use the word play and playful a few too many times. I could just talk play all day.
I love it.
The home that I grew up in was adjacent to nature space, basically open space. So outside my back door, I could play in the woods all the time. So I grew up with a great appreciation for playing in nature.
And you were in San Francisco.
Well, Marin County specifically is
Okay.
where my parents had moved to before they decided to have kids. And a lot of their friends from San Francisco had moved up there. And it was an incredibly warm and supportive and, yes, playful community.
Man, what were your favorite ways to play as a kid? Like, what are some of the most meaningful experiences you had?
The number one play experience that I go back to, especially when it is in relation to the design of the playground, when it would rain on the hill we grew up in, there would be these little creeks that would get formed, little temporary creeks. They were probably too small to call a creek. They just ran alongside of the street that we would walk up to our house. But we would create dams with little mud dams and sticks, and we would sometimes float little homemade boats down them. And playing in water with mud or sand, very much some of my favorite childhood play memories.
Man, and then was there a point where, kind of like all kids do, you outgrew play? Or was there a time where, like many kids or really adults do, that you outgrew play? Or has play been an essential part of your life this whole time, and that's why you're here where you are?
I am definitely here because I have never wanted to and never accepted that you have to let go of play. Absolutely. I think that I was drawn to this work especially because it would allow me to stay connected to play. And my entire career, and while I'm not big on air quotes, I'm going to throw them out there, my career has always been playful. We can dive into some of what that was like, but I've really never had a very serious job in my whole life.
Yeah, tell me more about that. Tell me about how play evolved for you beyond childhood and building dams along your street.
Well, it does go back to childhood, in which I think my parents were the kind of parents, as I think a lot of the hippie parents were, that they were always pushing me to figure out what I loved to do, and that would be what I would do for the rest of my life. And it took a long time. I was 41 when we stumbled on the idea of Harper's Playground, but I had been having really playful jobs until then. In fact, I studied film and television in college because I thought it would be fun to make movies. And when that didn't really pan out for me, I got a job in the mailroom at Adidas because I love sports and I thought it would be fun to work at Adidas.
And that was here in Portland?
That's here in Portland, Oregon. Yep. And out of the mailroom, I was studying all the different jobs at Adidas, and it looked like sports marketing would be the most fun because you got to work with the athletes directly.
100%.
Give them product and go to their events and have a good time.
You're literally working with players.
Precisely. Yeah. And I worked with skateboarders and Olympic athletes and gymnasts and boxers, a really nice variety. For me, playful environments include a lot of variety of experience.
That's true.
So I got to enjoy that. And then I was snatched away from Adidas by Red Bull energy drink, which you might not at first think of it as a playful brand, but man, they have a lot of fun over there. Wait, Lennon had a thing to say about Red Bull. What was that, Lennon? Yeah. Well, I'm much prouder to be building playgrounds than giving away free Red Bulls. That's true.
Yes. Red Bull is maybe the most fun brand that I've never bought anything from.
There you go. Yeah. Not everyone needs it, but it works well for those who do. We'll leave it there.
That's so funny. Okay, so you're living here in Portland. You're working these fun jobs. Are you married at this point?
At some point in that whole story, yeah, we got married. Actually, and that's a good interjection. When I met my wife, I was on hiatus from a traveling tribal music band that I was a member of for a year.
What? Really?
Yeah.
That sounds playful.
It was very playful. I spent 1 year in it was a glorified drum circle, but we had a CD and we traveled all of Mexico. And so when I met my wife, I was in the band. I was on a break and we dated for about a month here in Portland. I went back to Mexico, and for about 5 months we were internet dating. It's funny. It's when email was sort of new.
Wow.
This was 1998.
You got mail territory right here.
Yeah. And it was a really great way to get to know one another. And towards the end of the 5 months, I convinced her to fly down to Puerto Vallarta, spend the final week with the band, at least in the the formation that the band was then, and we drove from Puerto Vallarta back up to Portland.
It's a great date.
Yeah, it was a really nice extended date, and it was when I got back to Portland after that 1 year in Mexico that I took that job in the mailroom of Adidas.
Wow. Okay. And then when did Lennon come along?
Lennon came along about how many years later? So we were married in 2001, and Lennon was born in 2008.
Wow.
Yeah. And she is one of the best things in my life ever.
And I would imagine that as somebody who loves play,
Yeah.
and kids are like made up of play and energy and fun, what were you like anticipating as the pregnancy continued and you were getting ready to like have a kid for the first time?
Well, so Lennon's pregnancy was very different from Harper's. Harper was our first daughter. She was born in 2005.
I got it.
And our anticipation, actually, I'm not big on overly anticipating things and overly. I just find that surprises are the best.
Yeah.
I guess. So we didn't have a lot of visions of how things would be. We didn't really, I think, overthink all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, having a child, I think, is overwhelming enough I couldn't even wrap my head around the fact that there was a baby in my wife's, belly. I mean, that was, I think us guys can't even contemplate that really. So I didn't have a lot of expectations, other than I really wanted to be a good dad, for sure.
And so, tell me a little bit more about Harper's pregnancy.
It was incredibly normal, at least for me. I think it's easier for the guy to say. But it was normal. Everything was tracking well. The only thing that was out of the norm was that I think she was 2 weeks late, and they decided that it was time to induce birth. And it was almost 2 full days that we were in the hospital going through the labor. And everything changed the moment she came out. Everything was outside the norm and different the very second she came out.
Really? How so?
She was purple and she was not able to breathe on her own. And I was standing there with the forceps. I was going to cut the umbilical cord, and I was still holding on to them, kind of nervous for my job, when she was whisked across the room by a team of nurses, and they had sounded alarm bells of worry. And it took a few seconds for me to realize that I didn't get to do my job. And then it took definitely a few more seconds to realize something wasn't right. And that was the start of several hours of her struggling to live.
And, I mean, Harper is still with us today.
Yep.
And so she did live. What were those moments like, though, where you were unsure?
Yeah. Harrowing, horrible, scary, and overwhelming feelings of helplessness, powerlessness.
Yeah.
I was over next to Harper. I was standing above her, so almost nose to nose, pleading with her to fight, to hold on. And her little body was working so hard for every breath. She had an otherwise benign cyst in her airway, but it was blocking about 80% of her airway.
Wow.
And all of the medical staff in the hospital tried to get an air tube in and to intubate her, and they continually were failing. And so then they were, between trying to get air into her body through the airway, they were then putting mass oxygen on top of her face just to keep her alive, basically. Yeah. Her readings were borderline for almost a few hours.
Wow. And
at one point, they actually brought a priest in and suggested that it was time to give up.
Wow.
Yeah. And of course, we were not willing to think about that until it was taken out of our hands, that's for sure. And about that time, one of the best doctors in all of Portland came from across the city and saved her life.
Really?
Yeah.
What was that doctor's name?
Dwayne Lundeberg. And he, to this day, treats her often.
Wow.
He's our go-to ear, nose, and throat specialist. We'll even ask him for advice on other parts of her body. He's so good.
We trust you. You've done a good job.
More importantly, Harper trusts him.
That's amazing. And so Harper ends up being okay. How long are you guys in the hospital for?
We were in the neonatal intensive care unit for a full month.
Full month.
And there were many ups and downs. In preparation for surgery, they found out that she has a heart defect, so they came to us with that news. there were a few other anomalies, and they suggested that it would be a good idea to take a blood sample and do some genetic testing to find out what might be going on that was outside the norm.
And what did that come back with? What were their expectations?
We actually had just gone home from the hospital after being there a month when we were called back to a meeting with a geneticist, and we sat in this very drab little room where they pulled out some Google printouts they had made because they had never heard of this difference that she has. They just told us what it was called. It's called Emmanuel syndrome. And they said that we should expect she would never walk nor talk in her lifetime. We have taught her how to walk using a walker. Yeah. And she can walk even sometimes independent.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And so tell me about defying those expectations. They didn't expect her to be able to walk.
So, yeah, that's funny. I earlier said I think the word I was looking for is expectations. I try not to carry too many expectations.
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of expectations during the pregnancy. And outside of being optimistic, which I love is one of your key words, outside of general optimism and creating positive visions for the future, I try not to hold on to expectations too hard. So when they told us what to expect, I certainly instantly said, we're not going down that path. We're not going to create a set of expectations for her life.
Yeah. Tell me more, like on a philosophical level, what not setting expectations does for the world and for individuals and for our lives.
I think it helps live in the present moment. I think one of the many gifts that Harper brought to us was that she dragged us kicking and screaming into the present moment, spending time worrying about her future and what that might look like, and especially whether or not it would be a dark or scary vision. We really had the epiphany early on that when we were present with Harper and when we remain present as people, everything's always cool. It's one of the things I love about play. Play is one of the manners in which humans are fully present. It's one of the best ways to remain present. And all kinds of gifts come through play. You are actually building skill. You're having fun, which is good for you. And the mere fact that you're being present means that you're going to be happier and more aware of the good things.
That's really good. That's really good.
Yeah, play is pretty cool.
So tell me about like your early experiences playing with Harper. Because she's, I don't know if this is the right word to use, but I guess this comes back to expectations. What I was about to say is she's different than expectations. But when you have no expectations, then there's not really a difference there.
Yeah, we held on to being present with her, which was miraculous and joyful. And while she remains nonverbal, she has always had the most intense and beautiful eye contact that I've ever experienced. And we communicate nonverbally, especially with our eyes, so much. So playing with her was always a joy. And the really interesting thing about having a child with a very severe disability and a child who is what they call typically developing in Lenin, I can tell you that they both bring incredible joys, incredible struggles, incredible miracles along the route, and it's equally the same amount of work and pleasure with both.
Lennon's giving a thumbs up right now.
Yep.
So cute and smiling.
Yeah.
Oh, man. And so I would imagine in those early days of playing, you do start to like look around and realize that the world isn't necessarily built for kids like Harper. Do you remember one of the first moments where, because she's just your daughter.
Yeah.
And then you look around and you're like, this doesn't work. This thing that works for me isn't working for her. This thing that works for this kid doesn't work for our kid.
Yeah. I consider myself a zealot for inclusion for people with disabilities. And I have to give a lot of that passion first actually to a woman that my wife and I went and heard speak. Her name is Kathy Snow. And she's written a book called Disability is Natural. She's a world leader in the concept that people with disabilities can and should be included in everything, school, the playground, the workspace. It's an incredible opportunity for the human race to do better, not just by people who experience disability, but those people with disabilities actually have gifts that are left on the sidelines.
Yeah.
This is one of the major themes of our playground idea, is that we don't build the playground out of charity for kids with disabilities. We build it because an inclusive environment is better for everyone. Everyone benefits when everyone's included.
And so talk about that in terms of the first time that you guys went to a playground.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to go back to Kathy for a second, just
Yeah.
because my wife and I went and heard her speak when Harper was about a year old.
Okay.
And it was so empowering to hear her message. And she really set the foundation, I think, for us when, now to answer your question that you just asked, about her 4th birthday, she learned how to walk with this little walker, this little yellow walker. And we took our maiden voyage with her in that walker to our neighborhood park. And we walked across the park. It's a beautiful neighborhood park. And we got to the far end to where the playground is situated. And she literally got stuck in those wood chips that surround the typical playground structure. And for us, that was certainly a bellwether moment, a moment that launched us into this crazy 7-year now journey for us of wanting to change the way playgrounds are built.
Man. So ultimately you, in my mind, are the expert on playgrounds. I don't know anybody that knows more about playgrounds. Maybe you know somebody who knows more than you about playgrounds.
I do.
But you are the person who is the expert in my mind on playgrounds.
I certainly have at least probably 20,000 hours on the subject. And I know there's a very smart man wrote something about 10,000 hours makes you an expert in something. I've got at least 20,000 hours. Actually, and I want to interject. I think most human beings are born experts in play. And when we tap into the gifts that we were born with, we can almost, very quickly become experts in playgrounds. And I brought a lot of childish or childlike enthusiasm to the playground process. For sure. I certainly tapped into some memories. One key memory for me, there was an empty lot that was at the bottom of the hill I grew up on where we used to build bicycle jumps and play tag, and all sorts of great play happened in this empty lot. And some well-meaning people came in and built a typical playground structure there, and they put a fence around it. And it really restricted the numbers of people who could enjoy that space. So as an expert, what I know is that almost nothing is better than the typical playground structure. I will go to bat on that idea. An overly structured environment is just not good for kids. A natural open space will beat it. So I'm an expert in the idea that almost nothing is a good idea. Minimalism is a good call.
That's good. Okay, I want to come back to that, but first I really like this idea of like tapping into your childhood self and tapping into that part of you that loves play and will always love play.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, it's funny. The design process that I went through with Harper's Playground, I maintained this sort of zealot's focus on making sure that anyone like Harper could get anywhere in the playground. So it really guided every choice. Anytime a designer had an idea that might compromise Harper's ability to navigate the whole space, then I fought against it. So I think that I certainly had no idea what I was getting into. I just knew that Harper had to get everywhere.
Yeah.
And then when we were putting something in the playground, whether it was the swings or some climbing piece, again, my next filter to make that decision was about whether or not Harper would be able to use it. So we have radical universal accessibility throughout the whole space, and all of the features are adaptive or have the greatest chance that everyone can use them. Those two things, plus our adherence to wanting to use natural materials and to maintain an overall beauty in the space, that today is still our design philosophy. It's so simple, and our whole business model is sharing that good news with as many communities as possible.
That's amazing. As an expert, tell me about what the problems are with traditional playgrounds, which obviously, you've already alluded to it, Harper can't use. But then also there are a number of playgrounds out there that are built to be inclusive, or at least that's the initial goal.
That's the word we're using.
That isn't quite, they're not as effective as what you've created. Tell me about, the problems there?
Yeah, I think there are three main problems with the typical playground. First and foremost, they segregate kids who use wheels out of the equation entirely. Second, they're overly structured environments. They're too much plastic and metal and stairways, and they're overly prescribed.
Yeah.
So that the typical child doesn't get a very good experience out of them. And I think the third major problem is they're a component of a public space that is too narrow in its thinking. A playground shouldn't be just for kids. In fact, the playground industry says, here's an area that's for 2 to 5-year-olds, here's an area that's for 5 to 12-year-olds, and that's it. And I think that's insane. I think a public park, whether it's the playground area or anywhere, should serve everyone. And that we do better if people of all ages and abilities play together and have a good time together. And I think ultimately shatter the notion that the playground is this separate entity. We think it should be more, should blur the line between public plaza and playground. People walk into Harper's Playground and they often comment that it's like nothing they've ever seen before, that they feel really good when they enter it. And what we have found is that people of all ages stay long and play long and have a good time.
That's amazing.
So we solve all three problems in our model.
All three. That's incredible.
I just wanted to take a quick break from this episode to tell you about Talkspace. We are huge self-care and mental health advocates here at Sounds Good. In fact, the people I was getting to learn from when we first launched the show, the guests we were having on, were some of the biggest encouragements for me to grow by starting therapy. It's been so incredibly helpful for me to better understand myself and the things happening in my life. And that's why I'm so excited to have Talkspace, the online therapy company, as this week's sponsor. Talkspace makes it easy to connect with an experienced licensed therapist that you pick based on your preferences for a fraction of the price of traditional therapy. And seriously, it is so easy. I went in and used my own little promo code to sign up. All you have to do is visit Talkspace.com/sounds, enter your email, create a password, and add a nickname. And then you can hop straight into a consultation to get you matched up with your perfect therapist. And as a special offer for the listeners of Sounds Good, you can use your coupon code SOUNDS at Talkspace.com/sounds. It'll get you $30 off of your first month, and it is a wonderful way to support this podcast. Talkspace, therapy for how we live today. And now let's jump back into the rest of our conversation.
I just want to back up really quick.
Yeah.
It's a crazy idea to start a playground. Tell me about the moment where you and your wife looked at each other and you're like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to not sell energy drinks anymore. We're not going to
I was at Adidas at the time. Yeah.
we're not going to work with professional athletes. We're going to put all of our attention and energy into building a playground. A lot of people in the world have ideas. A lot of people in the world see problems that need solutions. Not a lot of people actually take that next step to create something.
Well, I would say we benefited from our naivete. We had no idea at first what we were getting ourselves into. Absolutely. It was a fairly slow process in some ways. I mean, with these big epiphany moments. I have to backtrack. Back when Harper received her diagnosis, when we received the news, and there were many sleepless nights, many sleepless nights, and lots of worry. I definitely was washed over with a calm when I decided that I was not going to focus at all on trying to change Harper, but I was going to shift my whole energy into changing the world.
Wow.
And I was going to change the world in a way that would change the way people with disabilities are spoken about, thought of, and included.
That's beautiful.
And that was when she was maybe 2 or 3 months old. It was 4 years later when I found the path. And the path, this playground path, is proving to have been the way to create this conversation.
Wow. Okay, and so tell me about those early days of getting started, creating a playground. What's the first step you take as somebody who I presume has never created a playground before?
Yeah, I think the first step is to go to your actual playground department. In Portland here, it's Portland Parks and Recreation, and every community usually has a department within the city government that manages the public playgrounds. And you tell them that you don't say you intend, you say you are going to do this and you want their help.
Wow.
And you ask them, what is the path? Lay out the path for me on what I need to do to get this done. And I think more important than anything, let them know you are serious, that you mean business, and that you're never going to stop.
Is there a little bit of fake it till you make it there? Is there a little bit of like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna make them think that I know what I'm doing? Or is that what it is?
Well, I think there's no doubt that being committed to the end result this is back to almost philosophy.
Yeah.
You must commit to an end vision, and while we spoke earlier about expectations, you remove expectations from the key moments along the path. You allow the miracle to unfold, but you hold fast to the end expectation, I guess, because to create anything amazing, you've got to hold steady to a vision.
Wow.
Yeah. Now I can say though that those people, your listeners, should reach out to me. They should ask me for help because that's what we do as a business now.
Now you're a pro.
Again, I don't want to use the word expert nor
but
pro,
I will.
but I can help people. Yeah,
that's amazing.
In a way that we didn't find anyone who could help us in that manner. At the same time, we found hundreds and really thousands of people that helped us in small ways. They helped with little things, whether it was, and there is no little act of kindness, but I mean, there were all these different pieces. I like to share, and I think it's important for your recording, the 3 years that we're creating Harper's Playground, to me personally, felt like being the co-pilot on a hurricane of love. And what I really mean by that, it was completely out of control a lot of the times, and that was part of the joy of experiencing the reminder that we have so much power, and yet so much is out of our hands, and remembering that dichotomy and really playing with that dichotomy.
That's beautiful.
Being comfortable with it.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's something that's, I feel like, huge about life, is this idea of like holding two things in your hand at once, this dichotomous experience. And what I found is that the people who are best able to accomplish things and the best able to change the world and the best able to cope with difficulties in their lives are able to hold dichotomous ideas in their heads and in their hands at the same time. Yeah,
I think being comfortable with the notion that we are completely insignificant and yet we are complete masters of an entire universe. Both are true. We are specks of sand in a massive playground, let's call it, and we are creators of entire universes, and both are really true.
Wow. Okay, so you've got this groundwork laid out of like, here's how you create a playground. What do you do next to actually start designing this thing? Because you were working for Adidas and Red Bull. You didn't, I would imagine, have architectural experience. Tell me about how you closed that gap.
Well, I took drafting my sophomore year of high school.
Really?
But again, I think we're all born players, and we're all born designers. And I think that's kind of why I was touching on the fact that the design of Harper's Playground, and any really good design, takes its cues from nature and just really requires being attentive. And it it takes more about being a good listener than it does about being really skilled or really smart. And ultimately, it comes from tapping into your heart. Love created Harper's Playground, and the design of Harper's Playground is reflective of just love guiding choices, not theory and not overthinking things. So after we met with our parks department, they very smartly suggested our next step was with our neighborhood association. So I'm getting back to process a little bit before I talk about design. The process of doing any massive project is getting stakeholder buy-in, basically, and you start thinking about who's everyone who we should get on board for this. Even before we got into design, that's something we did. And then with regards to design, that sophomore drafting class, I had a really good friend in that class who is now a fantastic landscape architect who was one of my first calls, and he helped throughout the entire process, make sure our design was excellent. His influence on the design, he is both a design expert, pro, and really good friend. And I think he would say I was involved, right? And I learned a lot throughout the process, but he was our lead designer. His name is Todd Gervin, and his skills in the design process were paramount.
That's incredible.
Yeah. You must get good people to help you.
Yeah.
For sure.
And it's an idea that I would imagine good people flock to. They're like, I want to be a part of this.
Well, that's a great question. So before Todd was really involved heavily, early on, the media got a hold of our story. And after the media got a hold of our story, we were flooded with playground industry catalogs and phone calls from sales guys.
Got it.
We actually started down that path of building. This is an important thing for your readers to know, or your listeners to know. The playground industry is flooded with people who are building quote unquote inclusive playgrounds.
Yeah.
And they are these massive structures with ramps on them. We almost made that mistake. And if I do anything on this podcast, I want to warn people away from making that mistake. The massive structure with ramps does not solve any of those three problems that we talked about earlier. Not even close. So we had that design. Our initial budget based on that design was $200,000. We started fundraising against that. And then there's a woman named Susan Goldsman, may she rest in peace, who is a world leader in the idea that we have now embraced, which is you can create an inclusive environment that is elegant and uses natural materials that works better for everyone. And it I hate to slam an industry, but it basically slams the entire playground industry because they're predicated on this notion that a playground has to be this big, monstrous structure.
Yeah.
And that's just not true. It's just absolutely not true. So our budget went from $200,000 almost instantly to $1.2 million when we shifted gears. But believe it or not, I'm answering your question. When we had this beautiful design that was the result of really Todd's and Susan's efforts and a community of people who got gathered together, interestingly enough, the day that gathering was my birthday, my 41st birthday. That was the day, as I listened to Susan describe the power of these playgrounds, that I knew this was what I would do the rest of my life.
Wow.
Absolutely, 100%. That was the moment.
That's beautiful.
It was really incredible. I was in tears because she was actually explaining how a good play environment, one of the benefits is that childhood brain development in a natural playscape is more robust and rapid and beneficial. And Harper's disability is slowed brain development. So that's why with tears in my eyes, I thought the rest of my life, I will now have a path to work on something I love doing that will benefit my daughter.
Wow.
Todd's drawing following this design change when we shifted our budget from $200,000 to $1.2 million, as you could imagine, it should be compelling, but Todd's drawing was so gorgeous, and within the drawing, it was so obvious that this was going to be a unique space, a really incredible space. That's when we started attracting a really different, I would just call it a caliber of person.
Yeah.
Not just a person with more means, but we did start getting much bigger donations. But we started gathering more dreamers, more visionaries, because the vision on paper was so cool that, I like to say now, if you want to catch bigger fish, you use a bigger lure. And that's really, it doesn't do justice to what I'm talking about, but creating a compelling vision, one that truly is shattering the mold, gathers the kind of people that you would want in your project.
That's incredible. And I believe it. I 100% believe that because
I experienced it.
Watching the video, seeing the photos, like experiencing the playground, even just in digital form or in layout form, blueprint form, it looks different. It looks like somebody dreamed it up, and it's one of those dreams where you're like, oh, this is incredible.
Yeah.
And of course it's going to attract the right people.
It is that. It certainly I was already so enthusiastic about going out and gathering support for our vision already, but my enthusiasm quadrupled. It was multiplied by 1 million.
That's amazing.
And of course, as I already mentioned, I knew this was now what I wanted to do with the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So the energy I threw into it, the enthusiasm I had for it was hard to measure.
That's incredible. Let's fast forward a tiny bit.
Yeah.
You bring this thing to life.
Yeah.
Tell me about all of the different components of this playground? What made it different? What made it special? And Lennon, I would love for you to tell me a little bit about your favorite part when you want to.
Yeah.
If you want to.
Yeah, Lennon. Actually, I really want to know, what's your favorite part of Harper's playground? Yeah. What do you like about it?
Just really fun.
And fun is good, right? So, I think first and foremost, I have to go back to our philosophy of what makes a good play space, and what truly makes it great is that it is for every person who enters it to decide what works for them best. It's open-ended. The most important feature in the playground is the hill that we built. We have a large hill that, while it's covered in AstroTurf, and it has to be, real grass would just not survive.
Yeah.
Especially the robustness of the play on there. But a natural form like a hill allows for climbing and jumping and running and sliding, and the hill can be a pirate ship tower. It can be a mountain. It's so open-ended. So the massive AstroTurf hill that we built really is I'd say the main draw. Then our sand area, where children can spin a wheel to release water into sand, is probably equally important, but it's number 2. It's a little smaller. It's especially important for toddlers who are new to this world. Children like to be able to shape their environment just a little bit, and so they can actually shape it by digging trenches and creating mounds, and it offers so much opportunity for collaborative play. When children play in an environment with natural materials that they're changing together, they usually get into a negotiation about sharing either a sand bucket or who's going to control the water. And these formative play experiences are really creating a foundation for collaborative adults.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
I hadn't
really
even thought
important.
about that. That's amazing. And do you guys just truck in sand? How does that work?
So the sand does travel all over the playground, and it then
into
dissipates.
pockets
It goes home with people. So yeah, truckloads come in about probably twice a year.
Cool.
And replenish. We also love having cleanup parties, and we sweep a lot of the sand back into the sand area. Arbor Lodge Park, where the flagship Harper's Playground is located, is the largest of only 3 pesticide-free parks in the entire city of Portland.
Wow.
So it's really important to us to help maintain that pesticide-free status with cleanup parties. And it's also our showroom, so we like keeping it clean.
Yeah. Okay, so you've got this giant hill. You've got sand.
Yep.
What else do you got?
I'm going to go number 3 of importance is we've got a lot of artwork in the space. There's a lot of bronze art pieces that really tell a story. There are large sea turtles next to the sand area, and they've laid eggs. And then there are smaller turtles that are climbing around the entire play area. And, it's funny to break it down into its pieces, though. You really start to lose the magic in a way of talking about what makes it so special. The use of natural materials is a key component. We have these massive boulders that are not just ornamental. They are climbed on. They work as benches. They provide one of the most important features in a playground, which is tactile feedback. And the overall elegance and beauty of the whole space is really the glue that keeps it all together.
That's incredible. You guys designed this beautiful space with all of this incredible, unique stuff. It's all natural. It's built to be inclusive. You open up on day 1. Tell me about the experience of people showing up to experience the sand and the hill and the whole experience.
The whole thing, the entire journey was so overwhelmingly blessed with support and difficult with regards to actually literally managing all of the support. My inbox was this avalanche of people offering some form of help.
Wow.
And just navigating that.
Yeah.
Just reading through it and deciding which of the many calls to make in what order. It was all overwhelming. I want to share that our groundbreaking ceremony, the first sort of ceremonial component of the project, was really wonderful. We had so many city leaders and neighbors, and we broke ground, and the energy there was fabulous. That set the tone for the whole build. We were able to demolished the old playground with a volunteer effort.
Wow.
And the local Timbers Army, the supporters group for our local MLS soccer team,
The best.
the best in the nation. I'm a proud member. We were able to do all that work as a team, and it was very cathartic, I think, to take out the old one
Yeah.
together. And then it was about a 4-month construction process, and I really enjoyed having a key to the construction area and walking around the space and seeing it take shape. And it was filled with the process of building it was so many ups and downs and late nights. And by the morning that it was time to actually cut the ribbon, I was dizzy with exhaustion and overwhelmed at the close of 3 years. So it really was it was completely surreal day.
Wow.
The place was covered with probably about 1,000 people. And, that day itself, I don't think you truly got the sense of how it was going to work.
Yeah.
It unfolded over an entire year's time that we just observed day after day, miracle after miracle of experience, emails flooding in from people who have enjoyed the space. And it was at about our 1-year anniversary of being open that the Today Show did a feature story on our story.
That's incredible.
And so we not only had reams of supportive messages from neighbors who were loving the space, but after this Today Show feature ran, we had hundreds of emails from around the country from people who wanted our support in taking on a project like ours. So it was literally one more full year that I had spent building the dream, building the plan to quit my day job and do this as a full-time thing.
And that's incredible. Like, that's what an incredible thing to be able to leave your day job and become a full-time playground engineer, player.
I'm a player. My job title is executive director, which doesn't. I need to come up with but I know sometimes those job titles are a little cheesy. Chief play officer, but I probably should be.
I just talked with one of the co-founders of Life is Good, his title is Chief Creative Optimist, which is a perfect fit for what he does.
I like that. Yeah, I would like optimism in my job title for sure. Yeah, good on him. So yeah, it's now my day job, and I have no idea what we were talking about anymore.
I don't know either, but I'm loving it. During that first, year where the playground is coming to life and you're seeing how kids are interacting with it, what were some of the things that you heard them saying?
Well, oddly enough, one of my favorite sounds at the playground is when a child pitches a good old-fashioned fit because they don't want to leave. But that truly is one of the best measures of the success of the space, I think, is when children hate leaving the space. And, there's such a national, really global epidemic of children not getting the amount of play they need, especially not outdoor free play. Children are sitting on iPads, and childhood obesity is this national epidemic. And at Harper's Playground, you hear kids pitching a fit because they don't want to leave. And that remains one of my favorite sort of sounds. On the more optimistic and just positive, I love being at the playground early in the day and witnessing families drive up or walk in from the neighborhood, and children sprint from their cars or sprint across the park to get to the play area. And there's something about the enthusiasm with which they enter the space, and also the fit pitching that they do when they're leaving the space. Those are some of my favorite things.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And ultimately, Harper's Playground is built to be an inclusive environment for kids who experience disability and kids who don't, to all play together.
Yeah.
What's it like for kids to be able to play with kids that they, in other playgrounds, wouldn't get to play with otherwise?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, the most important epiphany of our whole project is that a truly inclusive environment benefits kids who experience no disability even more. And this is a natural component of universal design. I mean, I think one of the most universally designed items in the world is the iPad or the iPhone, this ability to navigate universes with the touch of a finger.
Yeah.
And neither of those things were designed for people with disabilities, but they've evolved into some of the most utilized tools for people with disabilities. And there's a great article in a Stanford magazine entitled The Curb Cut Effect, which outlines all of the benefits to people who experience no disability at all from the simple curb cut on a city street corner. That was, it's imperative for somebody who uses a wheelchair to be able to navigate a cityscape. But a work person who's got a dolly, or somebody on a bicycle or a skateboarder, or anybody pushing a baby in a baby carriage, man or woman, they utilize the curb cut. So this notion that universal design is a charitable endeavor needs to be shattered. It needs to go away. People have to realize that universal design is better for everyone.
It's better for everyone.
Yeah.
It's amazing. One of my favorite things about Harper's Playground is this metaphor that is a part of the entire thing. And I remember when I saw you speak at TEDx Portland a few years ago, this is the thing that gave me a lot of goosebumps. Tell me about sea turtles and how the sea turtle plays into this incredible park you've created.
My wife and I actually, on our honeymoon, woke up on a beach right beside a sea turtle that was laying its eggs. So it was a special thing for us on a personal level. But certainly, as we were thinking about which animal to choose to create the bronze sculptures within the playground environment, what would it be? We thought long and hard about, should it be an animal that is really native to North Portland? And most certainly the sea turtle is not. But we settled on the sea turtle because of the really powerful metaphor of if you create the right environment, everyone can fly. The sea turtle struggles on land to move. It's an incredible sight to see a sea turtle use every ounce of energy it can just to drag itself on a beach and then, again, back into the water. But when they're in the water, when they're in their natural environment, they literally soar like an eagle. And we wanted to create that message, that undertone, that everybody, given the right space, can really fly.
That's beautiful. So with all of this in mind, with years of creating this playground and helping to empower people to create their own playgrounds, and many more playgrounds are being dreamed up for the future, what does the future look like, both in terms of playgrounds and in terms of the world? Like, what does a more inclusive world look like?
Yeah, I certainly think that we can do this. Like, the human race can get through this madness that is division, that is greed. One of the many beautiful things about Harper's Playground, I think it's the concept that we can share, we can all get along. I mean, it harkens back to the old hippies, but and it's also about people power. The people can guide their governments on how they want this world to be. Because Harper's Playground is built in a public space, and we covet the public space. I think there's so many layers of messaging here. If we all get involved in shaping our own environments and demand, literally, that they serve everyone, we can do this. I mean, the playground is sort of the Trojan horse for me in the way of suggesting that we can take care of everyone.
Cody is the coolest. I can't get over the fact that he is a person who has dedicated his entire life to making sure that everyone is able to play. Like, that makes him the most fun person to hang out with. It felt like such a playful time. And what could be a more important life goal than to try and keep the child alive inside all of us? We need to go back to this important moment really quick in the conversation where Cody said this: I definitely was washed over with a calm when I decided I was not going to focus on changing Harper, but I was going to shift my whole energy in changing the world. And I was going to change the world in changing how people with disabilities are spoken about, thought of, and included. Wow, a lot of us see a lot of problems in the world that need solutions, but not a lot of people actually take that first step towards solving that problem. It's so inspiring to hear Cody's story and see how that has activated real change in the world. And even more than that, brought awareness to this idea that play is an idea worth fighting for. It's important to remember that Cody and the team at Harper's Playground do not build playgrounds out of charity for kids experiencing disabilities. They build them because an inclusive environment is better for everyone. To emphasize what I said earlier, if you create the right environment, everyone can fly. You've got to follow Cody Goldberg and Harper's Playground on Twitter and Instagram, and check them out and support their work at harpersplayground.org. Their work is incredibly important and could use your help in spreading the word. If you're new to this show, sounds good, we would love for you to stick around and listen to more episodes. If you liked this episode, you'd also love our conversations with Bob Goff and Jason Russell, both giants in paving the way for real change to happen with one act of radical kindness. This podcast is created by me, Branden Harvey, as a part of Good, 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 a community that believes in the power of celebrating good news and becoming good news. You can get lots more hopeful stories like this one by following us on social media everywhere at GoodGoodGoodCO. We also create a beautiful quarterly newspaper that celebrates the people, ideas, and movements that are changing the world for the better. And I'm so excited to share that we have just launched issue 2 of the paper. If you're already following us online, you've seen the cover. It is beautiful, and I cannot wait for you to see the inside and all of the incredible stories of good news that we're sharing. Order your copy of the Good Newspaper today at shop.goodgoodgood.co. Oh, and one more thing before we go, I just want to say thank you to Talkspace for sponsoring this week's episode. Go to Talkspace.com/sounds and enter the coupon code SOUNDS to get $30 off of your very first month. On that note, that is a wrap for this week's episode. Go out and do some good this week, and we'll be back next week with another inspiring story from an incredible person. Sound good?